Let me go ahead and state the obvious. There's about a million ways to make a pizza. Even with pizza dough recipes, it's easy to get overwhelmed with the amount of choices you need to make. What type of flour should you use? Should it be bleached or unbleached? Active dry or instant yeast? Should you use sugar? What about honey? Do you really need a baking stone? I could go all day, people. But you're here for answers, not questions, in your journey to make a damn good pizza at home. So let me just walk you through my go-to recipe for making what I would consider a pizza to rival the best takeout version at just a fraction of the cost. This is Kitchen Serious. I'm going to keep it relatively simple here. As is customary in most of my videos, you can choose to walk down a simplified path or one that has a few more steps but yields a more desirable result, in my opinion.
Hey, so what's your favorite pizza topping?
I was getting to that. Toppings will actually play second fiddle here. So I'm just going to go with my favorite all-time combo, Italian sausage and mushroom. With one catch. Here's where the simplified path comes in. I'm making my own Italian sausage. It's super easy, and I love controlling which spices are in it, as well as how spicy to make it.
Hey, send it back. Too spicy.
The base for the Italian sausage will be ground pork. Now, there are a lot of spices to add, but one stands out above all to really give it its signature Italian sausage flavor. That's ground fennel seed. So make sure not to skimp on this one. I think I actually skimped in this recipe, but at the video's end where I give you all your shopping list ingredients, I'll make sure to adjust that. So to the pork, I'm going to be adding the following: fresh chopped garlic, onion powder, smoked paprika, oregano, basil, garlic powder, crushed red pepper flake, salt, light brown sugar, ground fennel seed, cayenne pepper for some added heat, that's optional, some black pepper, and our last dry ingredient will be some dark brown sugar. Again, all the measurements will be on your shopping list at the end. Feel free to experiment with this and have some fun. Other add-ins could be a pinch of nutmeg, chopped parsley, rosemary, thyme. The only wet ingredient I'm adding will be some apple cider vinegar to bring a little sweet acidity to the party. Out of habit, I always pre-mix my dries before adding, to ensure there's no pockets of any one spice to throw things off. So combine all this with the pork and give it a good mix. Lastly, incorporate the cider vinegar. Once everything comes together, you can wrap it and store it in the fridge. As we'll get to shortly, it's super important to give the pizza dough a long refrigerated rest, normally overnight, so I normally do the same with the sausage. Ideally, you would knock out the dough and sausage the day before you want to crank out your pizza. Now it's time for the make or break pizza component, the dough. It's always optimal to work with unbleached flour, which still has beta-carotene pigments, which give the dough better flavor and aroma. It's not the end of the world if you have bleached, but try to make the switch and see if you notice a difference. The other consideration is all-purpose versus bread flour, which is a high-gluten flour. For a more tender crust, AP is a good choice. If you want a more durable American-style pizzeria crust, you'll want to go with bread flour. My personal preference for this type of pizza is using a 50-50 blend. For the yeast, most are buying this at their local supermarket and will have a choice of either active dry or instant. I opt for instant yeast as you need less of it in recipes than active dry. It also doesn't need to be bloomed in warm water before adding to the recipes like active dry does. But if you are curious, you'll typically need about 25% more active dry than you would instant if you're ever in a situation where a recipe calls for instant and you only have active dry. With those choices out of the way, let's get to making our dough. We're going to start with 5 cups of flour, so for me, that's 2.5 all-purpose, 2.5 bread flour. To this, we're going to use 1 teaspoon of instant yeast, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 2 teaspoons table salt, or if you want to use kosher salt, you could make that 3.5 teaspoons. As always, give this a good stir before we get our wet ingredients in there. For the keen observer, you can see that this is actually my KitchenAid mixer bowl, and that's what we're going to be using fitted with a dough hook to get all this pulled together. So I'm going to go ahead and start up the mixer on low and add 1 3/4 cups room temperature water. To this, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of olive or canola. I prefer a neutral oil like canola. Now let this go until some flour piles up on the sides. You can stop it and then scrape it back down again. If you find that the dough is too dry and stiff, add a little warm water by the tablespoon until it pulls together. On that same note, if you find that it's too wet and sticky, you can add a tablespoon of flour to the mixture. Perfect example is right here. I notice it's kind of dry and crumbly on the bottom, so I go ahead and stop the mixer and add 1 tablespoon of water. This comes with practice, but remember, you want this all to be one uniformed ball. Okay, this is looking much better. I'm going to now let this rest for 5 minutes. After the rest, we're going to mix it at medium-high speed for another 2 minutes until it clears the sides and sort of sticks to the bottom of the bowl. You'll know the dough is ready when it passes what they call the window pane test, which I'm going to show you now. After tearing off just a little piece of the dough, you want to start stretching it outward. And hopefully you can stretch it enough to where it forms this really thin membrane that you can see your fingers through, a window pane. And this just tests gluten development, and you know it's ready to go if it passes the window pane test. If it tears too easily, then you need to keep kneading and build that gluten up. Now I'm going to divide this into 4 and form a nice tight ball with each one. This is where I want to stress the importance of what they call a delayed fermentation. This is best achieved by putting these in the fridge for 24 hours. The fridge slows everything down and allows the enzymes extra time to break down the starches. Long story short, more sugar is available to taste rather than just being converted into carbon dioxide and alcohol. So yeah, do this and your crust will taste better. For best results, yes, definitely use a pizza stone. If you don't have one yet, you can help the channel out and grab the one in the description. It's awesome. Next, I'm going to throw a little oil on there, get them in their own Ziploc bag, and stick them in the fridge for 18 to 24 hours. All right, it's now the next day, and we're getting ready to make our pizzas. What you want to do first and foremost is preheat your oven to the hottest it will go. I'm going to cook up our homemade Italian sausage, followed by a few baby portobello mushrooms. I like to pre-cook some of my mushrooms to get rid of some of that water, so it's not soupy when I pull it out. Now for the sauce, you can buy your favorite brand. I'm going to show you how I make mine. I'm going to use 1 can of whole tomatoes, crushed by hand. And to this, I'm going to start with 1 tablespoon of basil, 1 tablespoon garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of dried oregano, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, or a couple good pinches, 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar, which I pretty much add to every tomato sauce I make. Can't forget the crushed black pepper. And now I use my immersion blender just to kind of pull everything together. Definitely not needed, but it can help break up some of those really big clumps of tomato. And a couple last minute additions, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil. And finally, to give it some body and to thicken it up a little bit, I'm going to add some tomato paste. And a day later, you can really see this dough has been active and it is ready to be used. So let's get to it. Now, since we are using a blend of AP and bread flour, it's not going to be as durable. Don't go tossing this dough around as if we were using 100% bread flour. And because I added a little cornmeal to the peel before I put my dough on, that's really going to act as kind of like ball bearings to help this thing roll off and onto the stone. Now the fun part, we get a little sauce on there, followed by some Italian sausage and mushrooms and a cheese blend. Any cheeses you like, knock yourself out. Now for the moment that a lot of people struggle with, but I'm telling you, if you use semolina or cornmeal on your peel, you'll have a much, much easier time. For example, here's a peel that had 0 cornmeal or semolina, and I literally made a lightning bolt type shape with this. It did not go well. Tasted good, but probably the ugliest pizza I've ever made. Oh, don't worry, I used cornmeal on the very next one. And what do you know? So after it hits the stone, it's only going to go for a few minutes, so keep a close watch on it. When that crust turns golden brown and that cheese is bubbling, pull that baby from the oven, let it rest for a couple minutes, and then give it a cut. And you tell me if this isn't the best pizza you've had in a very long time. The outer crust is crisp, the inside is chewy. In my opinion, this is the perfect pizza. If you want to give this a shot, as always, here is your shopping list. So thanks for checking out Kitchen Serious, guys. I will see you next time.